Hello and welcome to this Reporters Roundtable. We're talking with Charlotte Ledger reporters. I'm Tony Messia. With me is Ashley Fay, our managing editor, and Lindsay Banks, our assistant editor. You can see Ashley there repping the Charlotte Ledger merch, which you can find. Actually, not to turn this into a sales pitch too early, but this edition of Reporters Roundtable brought to you by the Charlotte Ledger merch store, gltledger.com. Need that stocking stuffer? Just joking. I mean, of course, we're happy if people want to buy that, but that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about some of the news of the week, some of the stories that we've reported and written. I see people coming back in. I see Vicky back for another round. She's a dedicated reporter roundtable watcher. And of course, if people have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, as they say. We will get to them as we can, and we'll let a few more people get in here. Ashley, Lindsay, how were your weeks?
Pretty busy, I will say. I mean, the news cycle feels like in Charlotte never really lets up, but it was pretty good, but pretty busy.
Yeah, I would say the same. And, obviously the holidays are less than 2 weeks away now. So I typically I feel like the news cycle tends to slow down a little bit this time of year, but I don't know if I would say that was reflected this week.
Yeah, it's always you kind of come into the week and you're like, all right, I think this is going to be kind of a quiet week. I know what I'm going to work on, and then something pops up, and then you sort of you have to scramble and go to that. So that's the way this week worked out. I want to talk. Let's see, Vicky asking if we can talk about the transportation vote from City Council. We'll see if we can get to that, Vicky. I guess the first thing we wanted to talk about that a lot of people have been talking about the last couple of days, really since yesterday morning, is this Sycamore Brewing situation. Really kind of shocking allegations that came out yesterday morning that the co-owner of Sycamore Brewing, which is Charlotte's largest brewery by volume, was arrested and charged with indecent liberties with a minor after he was arrested after going into a house in Stanley County, and the victim is alleged to be a 13-year-old girl. He was arrested. He's still in jail. Last I saw, in the Stanley County Jail on a $10 million secured bond. And obviously, that's a horrific crime, a horrific allegation. It's just an arrest. Nobody's been convicted. There are obviously a lot of questions about what happened there, but to have somebody who's pretty high profile like that arrested and charged with something that's so horrific is pretty shocking. A lot of people talking about that. There are some sort of questions as to what exactly happened. How did he know the victim? All that that we don't have answers for yet. But one of the things that we do know, of course, is that there's been a lot of fallout very quickly toward Sycamore brand, and this is a very well-known beer brand here in Charlotte. They've got the tap room in South End. They've got a spot at the airport. They're building another tap room in Cotswold, and they distribute very widely throughout the Southeast, and so the economic fallout to that brand, I think, is starting to look like it might be more significant than you think. I mean, this was the co-owner. It was a husband and wife. His name's Justin Brigham. His wife Sarah. They co-founded this brewery more than a decade ago. And people, have been saying on social media, "Don't go there, boycott." And we're starting to see some of the economic fallout from that. I know, Ashley, you've been working that a little bit today. What have you found out?
Yeah, basically, I've been reaching out to a lot of the grocers with stores in the area, Lowe's Foods, Whole Foods Market, Food Lion, Publix, Harris Teeter. I've heard back from most of them so far, and they've all said that they've requested that their individual stores pull the product. And some said, I know Food Line specifically said, they are discontinuing all future orders of a Sycamore. So that's certainly been kind of the initial fallout, I think. I've been on social media, Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, and you're seeing a lot of folks just saying different individual restaurants and bars saying we are no longer carrying Sycamore. We don't plan to. Bargarita in Noda had a actual video of them pouring down Sycamore down the drain. I know one bar in Wilmington, not local, of course, but on social media, they said that they would use all the remaining money spent on whatever they have left of their Sycamore products and donate it to a local rape crisis center. So yeah, the fallout certainly has been swift and pretty profound. I reached out to Adams Beverages, who's the distributor for Sycamore. I haven't heard back from them yet. As of this morning, they still had Sycamore listed on their website, but I'd be curious to see what they're kind of doing and what their next steps might be, obviously being the distributor. But yeah, to your point, Tony, I mean, this is the second largest brewery in the state, not even just the biggest in North Carolina, second largest after Highland in Asheville. They produced over 30,000 barrels last year. And to your point, they're definitely a well-known brand, a very big business here in Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think the key is going to be what the distributors do, because if the distributors cut them off, then that's it. You know, you're not distributing. And there's not to say that, you know, that it's necessarily a permanent thing. You know, you could see them potentially coming back, but it's like if you don't have a distributor distributing your beer, you cannot, it will not get sold in any grocery store, in any bar. I mean, in North Carolina, you have to work through distributors. And so that's going to be a big question. And I know reach out to Adams Beverages. Haven't heard back, but that's going to be, I think, pretty key to seeing how they navigate this. I mean, again, it's worth pointing out. I mean, there's no allegation that this is some sort of a part of the Sycamore culture. That this is a, you know, a pretty prominent guy, or the co-owner of the brewery. But you know, you do obviously have a lot of employees there. You know, people who work in the tap rooms, people who work in the brewery operation. You know, I saw that Sarah Brigham, you know, his wife and the other co-owner, you know, came out and said, I think is, you know, saying, listen, he's divesting from the brewery. I am running the show. Obviously, these are terrible allegations. You know, I can't imagine what the PR, you know, and marketing. I mean, obviously, there's a human toll to this. Don't want to minimize that, but you know, the PR and marketing folks with Sycamore, you know, that's a Herculean task. It's not like it's the first company that's ever had executives or well-known people connected with a brand having some sort of controversy. You know, I was sort of trying to think of other brands that have been through something similar, you know, in terms of having a controversy. You know, and Jared of Subway came to mind. You know, like, you know, spokesman for Subway for a long time. You know, had charged with sex charges. That was a big hit to Subway's brand about 10 years ago. But I think the other point is this is not necessarily a permanent thing. You know, if you think of Subway nowadays, I don't know that anybody thinks about that very much. You know, it's a sandwich shop, right? And then you think of I thought also of CPI. You know, its CEO made some controversial comments after the George Floyd protests, and a lot of the you know, places where CPI would advertise in professional and college stadiums and basketball arenas drop CPI. Well, then if you look a couple years later, CPI still comes back. So this isn't necessarily a permanent thing, but it's certainly a big hit, I think, for Sycamore.
I think that's going to be important to watch, Tony. It's just kind of like how this transpires. Obviously, we need to see how the case itself transpires as well. And, you know, if we learn anything more in the coming weeks on this, but, you know, what is Sycamore going to have to do to sort of pivot from this? And how are they going to think about, you know, do they need to sell the business? I'm not saying that I've heard that. I'm just saying, like, I think they're going to be facing some serious questions here for sure.
Lindsay, you have any thoughts?
Nothing really to add. I just think this whole thing has kind of unfolded pretty quickly. I think the incident happened, I believe it was on Wednesday, and then yesterday was when, you know, the word got out and media started reporting on it. And then today we're learning about grocery stores pulling it from their shelves. So, yeah, I think we're definitely going to be watching over the weekend and into next week to see, you know, what happens and as more details come out.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, you know, a horrible situation. Yeah, I don't really know as far as the business, you know, what happens. Do people actually stop drinking Sycamore beer on a long-term or permanent basis because of this, or does it blow over and by next week we'll be talking about something else? The news cycle tends to move very fast, but certainly not a brand image that if you're in a consumer product, especially, that you want to have you know, projected. Want to switch gears a little bit, talk about some of the other things going on this week. We had a story on Wednesday that I reported and wrote about Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools enrollment numbers. Those were finally released by the state. I'd been asking for them for almost a couple of months to try to see. Well, we always like to look at CMS enrollment numbers to sort of see what's going on. They fell to their lowest level in 14 years, a little over 139,000 students. It was a little over 141,000 last year. It had been kind of stabilized at that level over the previous few years after COVID. So it's about a little less than a 2% drop. Is that a big drop? What does it mean? And the reporting basically showed that uh, because of the increase to a large degree in enrollment in charter schools and private schools and homeschooling, that sort of explains some of this drop. At the same time, there are demographic changes, that people are having fewer children now. And so the interesting part I thought was that, even in a fast growing county like Mecklenburg County, which, as we all know, is growing by leaps and bounds, that your public school system would have declining enrollment. Again, not a dropping off a cliff, but it's a decline. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And it's not something that's really been discussed all that much. Maybe, I don't know, maybe people can judge. Maybe it's not that big of an issue. It seems to me to be kind of odd and something worth talking about. And, why is that? And is that a trend that needs to be reversed? I thought it was kind of interesting. You thought?
Yeah, your story kind of pointed this out too, Tony, but of course the enrollment tied to funding. And, with public school funding always kind of being in the conversation about how much the school systems are getting, you hear all the time how public schools are underfunded. I'm not making a comment on that. You just kind of hear that talked about a lot. And so, if enrollment continues to decline, and we don't know if it will or won't, does that affect how much funding CMS schools get from the state? So I do think that's a very notable point too.
Yeah, I see Vicky asking a question. Are charter schools public schools? The answer is yes. Charter schools are public schools. They do receive public money, but they don't have to follow it's a different structure in terms of how they get that money and the rules that they have to follow, that sort of a thing. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. CMS, I talked to CMS. They described it as a minor drop, a minimal drop, a slight decline. They said they'd already taken care of some of the staffing, because they have this process every fall where because, as you mentioned, Ashley, the funding for public schools is tied to the enrollment, that they've already adjusted that staffing, and so they didn't foresee any problems. But certainly, I thought it was kind of interesting to see, and that's one of those sort of perennials. Every year we kind of look at that enrollment. And the other interesting part I thought was looking at some of the high school enrollment. It was the case a few years ago that Myers Park, Ardrey Kell, and South Meck each had over 3,000 students. Now, because of the opening of Ballantyne Ridge in the Ballantyne area, the enrollment of those by design has dropped, all of them to below 3,000, except for Myers Park, which is a little over 3,000. And so, that was sort of interesting to see that some of those numbers play out. But yeah, there could be some more information, I think, coming out from CMS just on the demographic information. Did the stepped up immigration enforcement have anything to do with a drop in enrollment? I mean, the numbers were measured before the Border Patrol arrests from November. So that's going to be something to kind of keep watching. Lindsay, any thoughts?
And don't I remember, I think in your reporting, CMS told you that they, just looking ahead at the projections, they're expecting it to be until maybe, is it the 2028, 29 year when they might starting to see an increase in enrollment again? Was that true?
That's what they said. Yeah, there was a consultant's report from last year, I believe, that said that they expect mild declines for the next few years, but then increases starting toward the end of this decade. So, you never know with projections. It's hard to predict the future. I want to talk a little bit. Ashley, you had a story this week about an art gallery in Eastover. What's going on?
Yeah, so the name Coffey and Thompson didn't mean anything to me, but apparently it does to a lot of Charlotteans. They've been in business since 1946, bills itself as the first art gallery of Charlotte. Could not, independently corroborate that, but 1946, not many things in Charlotte have been around that long. So while they haven't been in Eastover since that time, I think they were once in Uptown and have been in a few other locations. Their most recent home was on Providence Road in that sort of main corridor that kind of bisects Myers Park and Eastover. I actually got a tip from a Ledger reader a few months ago on this. Basically, he told me, I put some artwork artwork commission to get framed. Never got it back. I've gone to the business. It seems like it's locked up and dark. Every time I've tried to reach out to them, I've been unsuccessful. So it's very strange. So I started looking into it, and it turns out there was a main tenant which was affiliated with Coffey and Thompson, and they actually got evicted earlier this year in September. And it turned out it was, this building was home to a lot of small businesses, a lot of artists that were sort of subleasing from the main tenant, which is Coffey and Thompson. But because that business got evicted, so did all the businesses and all the artists who were in there. And so it was a big scramble trying to get their artwork out, trying to get their inventory out. There was a photographer in there. There was a guy who does custom suits for a lot of professional athletes. Again, there was a lot of artists many of them still haven't gotten their paintings and artwork back, which is pretty wild to think about since this happened in September. And I dug through some court filings and found out, that the trust that owns the building claims the owner owed over $360,000 in unpaid lease, rent and unpaid rent, and had been in the building illegally since her lease expired December 31st, 2024. And it went to court, and the court decided that they ruled in favor of the plaintiff, of the owner of the building. So that's when the eviction happened. But to this date, there's still a lot of questions about what happens to some of the artwork in there, and will some of these customers of Coffey and Thompson get their work back. So from what I understand, the lawyer that's representing the trust has been trying to kind of work with the individuals to go in and get and retrieve their stuff. Basically, you have to prove that like you own this item, or you had something in the building. But it's a very convoluted story, and a lot of the artists I spoke with and people kind of in Charlotte's art gallery industry say, we can't believe what went on in that studio, in that gallery. We were hearing that artists weren't getting paid. I reviewed some documents that suggested certain artists didn't get paid for their work, the agreed upon commission for a sale of a painting at the gallery. So this story had a lot of layers. It was a one that took a while to kind of get through with the reporting. Talked to a lot of folks who had a story to tell, and a lot of it really didn't even make it in the story, just because, even though it was a lengthy story, there was still a lot left on the cutting room floor. But anyway, Tony, it was very interesting, and I've heard from some folks since it published, and keep hearing about how Coffey and Thompson was just this known name in Charlotte, and now it just seems like this business doesn't exist anymore, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with it either. It's not really a circle that I run in terms of high-end art and framing, but I thought it was interesting, that some people told you that it was basically, in many cases, a status thing, that they would take it there, that it was, that, oh, it's like this was framed at Coffey and Thompson. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, one artist, one woman who had worked there, she had said that like she hears from people like, oh, like this is my Coffey and Thompson framed piece from the 60s. Like people just apparently know that name, and they know like sort of the prestige, so to speak, that was associated with that brand for so long. Now, Paul Thompson, who was the owner of it for 67 years, he passed many years ago, and the business transferred ownership, I think around 2015, if I'm remembering correctly. But a lot of people say like he was really well regarded, like really well respected, the framer of Charlotte kind of thing. So they don't think his reputation's necessarily ruined, but certainly since the most recent ownership, things have maybe changed in that respect.
Lindsay, is that Coffey and Thompson artwork behind you on the wall?
No. They are vintage records, though.
Okay, that's good to know. Well, that was an interesting story, and good job getting to the bottom of it. Those things are kind of hard. It's hard when you don't have everybody that you want to talk to available to talk to, but you can tell a story through other people and through court records and public documents, and so we do the best we can to try to unravel things, and that was I thought a really good effort. Lindsay, you had a piece today about books. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so usually this time of year, I like to reach out to Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library and just see what the top titles of the year have been, as far as checkouts go, because I think it's interesting just to see what other Charlotteans are reading and if they're following the trends that I'm witnessing on Book Talk, which is the bookworm side of TikTok, and Bookstagram is the book side of Instagram, if anyone's in those communities. But so I reached out to the library. They sent me back their top 10 titles for print and for ebooks. And I'll spare reading through the whole list right now, but you can find the full list on the Charlotte Ledger. But I wasn't actually too surprised by any of the titles. I think usually, like new fiction does really well, especially with popular authors like Emily Henry. She had a new book that came out, I believe, in April of this year, if I'm remembering correctly, called Great Big Beautiful Life. And she's just a really popular author right now because one of her books is being turned into a movie that actually comes out next month on Netflix called People We Meet on Vacation. So wasn't surprised by that. Onyx Storm is another one. It's the third book in a fantasy dragon romance action series.
Okay.
Very highly anticipated.
Wait, is it dragon romance? Dragon fantasy romance?
Yeah, pretty much. That's
Is
how
it
I
the
would categorize
dragons
it.
that fall in love? Or
No. No. Well,
no spoilers. No
No
spoilers.
there is a couple in the book that are dragons, so I guess you could yeah, you could call it. Yeah, you could say that. And then another book actually that I was surprised that's on here is Remarkably Bright Creatures, not because it's not a good book, I've read it myself, but it's a little bit of an older book, older meaning a few years. But it was really popular, I feel like a year or two ago, so the fact that it's still on this list, I think is a testament. If you haven't read it, it's kind of follows three different characters in this one story, but one of the characters is an octopus, and it's told from his POV. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's a really good read. It's very different.
It's a really good book, Tony. I see your skepticism, but it's great.
We'll see if it winds up in my stocking. Who knows? How does this list compare to Book Talk and Bookagram and Booked In and BookBook?
And Goodreads.
Yeah.
There you go. I would say it matches up pretty well, from what I was saying, being recommended. And I would say I've probably read maybe 50% of the list of ebooks. That was another thing because they sent me the ebook list and then the print list, and there were more ebook checkouts than the print list. But also there were some, overlapping books that were on both lists, but the ebook got more checkouts. But I will say on the print list, there were, I think, 3 Diary of a Wimpy Kid books that were on there, which is obviously, I think that's a middle school. I think that's the reading level. It's like a middle school picture comic book. I never got into Diary of a Wimpy Kid, but I know there's like dozens of books out there, and they keep coming out with them. So that was cool.
My
to
kids
see.
were really into Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and I didn't know whether those I just sort of are on there every year, or are they somehow making a comeback? I don't know. We know the
I
answer.
Yeah, I don't have enough. I do know. I mean, the author is coming out with new. What are they? It's kind of a series, I guess. So the next
Okay.
book, it's still an ongoing series to at least to what I know about it. But yeah, so I thought that was kind of interesting, and I think that's cool to see. 3 children's books made the list for top checkouts across CML this year. So.
Well, that's interesting. We know that Ledger readers, they are readers, and they do like to read, and so we do feel like getting those lists out. I know usually you've done summer books, and we've had people recommending books, and we talked to people at Park Road Books and Trope Bookshop and some of the independent retailers. Hopefully those guys are doing okay. This holiday season. So that was kind of neat to see. Just about out of time. We're just talking about some of the top stories of the week and things that we've reported on in the Charlotte Ledger. The other one that I really liked today, the Ashley story on the rage rooms. Ashley, can you tell us a little bit about what the thinking was on rage rooms? What's going on with the rage rooms, and how did that story idea come about?
Yeah, I mean, ragers have been around now a while. Like I would say, starting in mid 2010s, they started popping up. And with a lot of these things, you always wonder if they're going to be a fad. It sounds like an interesting concept in theory, but like how sustainable is that business model long term? So I actually found a couple of folks who have been at this since like 2018, 2019. Tonic Rage Room in Concord opened in 2019, and House of Purge in Charlotte opened in 2018. And there's going to be a franchise model Rage Room coming to Charlotte next year. So there's still
Smash, I think it's called, right?
Yes. So it's still a business. It's still chipping away. I talked to these owners about what compels people to come to a rage room, and it really runs the gamut. One guy said, I've seen everyone from veterans to people who just lost a family member and want to work through their grief to, someone just went through a bad breakup to, a bunch of 60-year-old women just want to get together and, throw plates at the wall or take a sledgehammer and beat the crap out of something. It's funny. It sounds so like, oh, it's everyone's so angry or whatever. But, one owner told me everyone who walks out of here has a smile on their face, like, because it feels like they're kind of getting a lot of stuff out. But I mean, this isn't a business you go into to make money. I was also curious about the business aspect of rage rooms, what goes into running one. And obviously inventory is the biggest challenge a lot of these folks kind of run into when you have everyone just coming through to destroy things. That clearly you're going to go through a lot of stuff. And with tariffs and inflation, some other things, it feels like these business owners their expenses have gone up quite a bit. One guy I spoke with, he has a car. He has to replace the car every week pretty much. So he's on Facebook Marketplace trying to get a beat up old car cheap and so that people can beat on it in the rage room. I myself tried it out. I as part of my reporting, I went and did a rage room, which I thought it was an interesting experience. I could see the appeal of it. It's a workout too. Like slamming that around is no joke.
I want to plug our Instagram. If you'd like to see Ashley beat the hood of a car and take a baseball bat to some what look like beer bottles, check it out on Instagram. We had a link embedded in the newsletter today. So let out some of her aggression. Ashley with a big smile on her face right now because she was able to get out that rage that she's got bottling up inside of her, having to deal with me and Lindsay.
I was picturing Tony Macias specifically.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, Vicky says, sounds like it might be cheaper than her therapist.
Well, that's what some people have alleged, that some people come in to either supplement their therapy with rage rooms, or sometimes I couldn't necessarily corroborate this, but some have said oh, my psychologist recommended that I go in and try a rage room out. So the sort of evidence on that's a little mixed. A lot of people say if you're facing serious anger problems, a rage room may not be the best idea. But if you're kind of approaching it as like a, stress relief or, just kind of for the fun of it. One guy was like, we are told growing up, don't paint the walls, don't break things. And it's kind of nice to be able to let those inhibitions go a bit, which a rage room kind of allows for.
Well, glad you were able to check that out. And we're just about out of time. So I appreciate you all talking about the news this week. We try to do this every couple of weeks or so. This is going to be our last one of the year, but we will probably be back in January doing more of these video chats. We just think it's a nice way to kind of break down some of the things we talked about and get it to people in a different format. And so I think it's good to do. And thank you all who've been on today for joining us. And you can obviously find us on social media and of course at our newsletters at the charlotteledger.com. We've got more next week. I know of a number of stories in the works that I think are going to be pretty good stories. We're approaching obviously the Christmas holiday. So we have another week's worth of newsletters, and then we kind of slow things down over, after the 19th, 20th or so until around the new year. A lot of people are out of town, people with their families and friends. And one of the last things they're doing is reading newsletters. And of course, we like to spend time with our families as well. So anyway, I hope everybody has a wonderful holidays. And Ashley and Lindsay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Bye.